GM, GA, GE, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? We are back for another episode of Web3JOE. That's Web3 Job Ops and Events, your hub, headquarters, and home base for all things Web3 talent and recruitment. They do power these spaces. We are here every Wednesday, every Friday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 12:30 p.m. Eastern, doing our best to fill this next 30, 40 minutes or so with as much value as possible. We do so by bringing on leaders from the space who have managed to break into working in Web3, be successful, and they've come here to share some insights on how you can do exactly that as well. Today, we got a very special guest with us. He is Tristan Dickinson. He's the new CMO of Babylon Labs. He's ex-Volta Foundation, ex-DYDX Foundation, and an all-around great person to know in the space. Tristan, I know you're a busy man. It means the world that you would stop by and hang out with us for a little bit. How are you doing? Happy Wednesday.
I'm doing well, man. Yeah. Your point around GE for me, but GM, GA, GE for everyone out there. I'm doing really well, man. Thank you. It's a typical kind of week in our space, to be honest. It's Wednesday, feels like Friday. There's a lot of different things on. Uh, Always very busy, but if you didn't love Web3, I think it would be hard to work in this industry. So I'm doing really well. Very excited about the next couple of weeks and very excited to have joined Babylon as a new CMO.
Beautiful, man. I gotta ask. I know you're, somewhat new in this role. How's it going? Are you settled in? What are your first thoughts?
It's going really well. Yeah, it's week 2, so early days. Definitely settling in, very good team, a lot going on, a lot of, big announcements, big exciting things coming up for the network. And it's really nice to be in the Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin ecosystem is very unique. It's specific, it's difficult, but when things work, they scale and they scale fast. I mean, I don't have many certainties in this space, but one certainty is that the price of Bitcoin will go up in 10 years. I think all of us kind of believe that. And some of the benefit to working in the Bitcoin ecosystem is if you find a product with, product market fit, it can very quickly go from a 1 million to a 100 million product. And that's the beauty of the ecosystem.
All roads lead back to Bitcoin, man. I could not agree more. Let's go ahead and get started. I did my best to give an intro, Tristan, but in your own words, can you let the people know who you are, what you do, and how you started doing it?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Tristan Dickinson. I'm Australian, but I live in Europe. So I moved to a few different countries because I wanted to kind of, from a work perspective and personal, get out of my comfort zone, live on, the other side of the world and not really know anyone and meet people and figure out what it's like to not know anyone and figure out like, do I go to this bar and meet someone if I don't know anyone? And, is that person waving at me or are they waving at someone else? And I think it's a very humbling experience. To go on, and I'm very thankful for that experience as well because I really do love living in Europe. I've been in marketing 16, 17 years now, worked fintech, banking, airline, media, um, and then obviously in Web3 really for the last 4 years. And I'd say each of those roles really helped me from a Web3 perspective. I think banking and fintech, it's quite structured in the sense of a dollar has to achieve an outcome. The outcome is end-to-end trackable, so that makes it easier. But the banking model is not so much around what should you spend, it's around what target do you want. And then based off this, that's how much you end up spending. So it's actually a really good model like that. I think the airline industry and media is crazy in terms of workload and time. So it's kind of like a soft entry into the volume of work that there is in Web3. Um, I guess the last thing that's relevant, I've been in Web3 personally since the end of 2016, and then professionally, yeah, for the last 4 years. But it just means that I've seen a few different cycles, made a lot of mistakes. Every one of us says the same thing all the time. I remember when Bitcoin was 3,000 Australian dollars, and I thought that was ludicrous. So it's crazy to see how far we've come as an industry. Also to see the maturity, and then also now to start to see what I believe is a bit of a shift in the industry where we're moving more towards fundamentals and proper business practices in the sense of driving revenue and having product market fit and, you know, not just the craziness of anyone can say anything in 2021. So I think that's really exciting. It's a big change for us. Um, but I think all of the experience that I've had over the past, 16 years has really put me in a really good position now with Babylon.
Yeah, I agree with you on the shift we're seeing too. It feels like there's a lot more. There's that line between Web 3 and Web 2 is getting blurred more and more as the industry evolves, which is good to see. I think it's healthy. Are there any milestones that you're especially proud of accomplishing since you joined Web 3 professionally?
There's quite a few things that I'm proud of. I think one of the challenges in Web3 from a marketing perspective is trackability. So end-to-end tracking of marketing initiatives is difficult because a lot of the time the endpoint to an extent sits on an exchange and an exchange is a giant MySQL database. So if you think about Web 2, you own your asset, right? If you have a credit card application form, you own it. You can track that end to end. You know what goes on. In Web 3, it's just a bit more complex to get to the source of truth. So I think what I'm quite proud of over the last 4 years is to come up with different methodologies that can get closer to the source of truth and not be obsessed with, I can't tell if someone has definitively taken an action, but I've got an inference point, and that inference point is enough to optimize my program. And so I've been able to see some strong results from taking this approach, which is a data and analytics first approach. And really what it is just replicating the Web 2 model. I think one other thing that I'm quite proud of this year was Bitcoin Las Vegas. It was a really big event that my previous company we sponsored, and it was a large amount of spend, a lot of activations. I think it was the task list of like 250 tasks. And I worked with the team, but I did a lot of the end-to-end tasks by myself. And so I thought it was the most successful event we went to, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that. It's not all just because of logistics. But I was quite proud of that because I had to speak on stage and then I also had to manage the logistics and then, work with the team. And it's like, how do you kind of figure out how to make all of this work? And then at the end of the day, it's really just about you will find a way as long as you kind of stay calm. The calmer your approach is to things, the more you try not to get stressed, the more you try not to bring, to an extent, negative energy, things end up working out. And I think that was something for me where I was grappling, I don't have enough time to prep for this keynote and I did so many things and got to a point 2 weeks before I was like, just relax. Everything's going to be fine. Just be calm. The calmer you are, the calmer everyone else is. And, take a lighthearted approach to things. And I think in general in business, that's what I tried to do. But particularly then it was, a bit of a minefield myself to navigate my own mind hockey. But then I eventually, got into a place where just relax, everything's going to be okay. And then it was a huge success. So that was really nice.
Molded by the chaos. Truly,
Well, exactly.
truly. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good outlook to just have on life in general. I'm not sure if I can think of an example where being panicked actually makes the situation better. But in the moment, we have emotions and we're humans and we feel how we feel. But exactly what you said, remaining calm, moving forward, walking through the flames and coming out stronger because of it. For people listening, Tristan, whether they be, junior level, mid level or senior level like yourself, and they're interested in breaking into the Web3 space, what advice would you have for people looking to get started in Web3?
It's a good question. And Web3 can be to an extent quite intimidating when you professionally work in it because it's similar to banking actually in fintech in the sense that there are so many acronyms and there's so much information. It's like if you know, you know. So I think one of the biggest things for Web 2 people breaking into Web 3 is also just to do a bit of your own learning before you try to work in Web 3. One of the biggest fears that people have in terms of hiring is that the onboarding process for someone from Web 2 just takes 4 times as long. And then when it comes to initiatives, they kind of try and apply what worked in Web 2 specifically channel or advertising wise, and that doesn't really fly for Web 3. So I think enough research before, and not research in the sense of reading articles on Cointelegraph, joining communities. I think one of the biggest benefits that we have in Web3 from a marketing perspective is you have walking market research daily. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, right? But at a bank, I remember paying, a large amount of money for market research to get an insight. And we have this thriving community that's is really, passionate about your project, and they will tell you things that are good or bad, but they will also give you a lot of insights. Particularly for me now, if I'm going for a new role as Babylon, as an example, then, I just scan socials and I get a pretty quick beat on what's going on. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things for a Web2 person is really do some of your own research on multiple areas. I mentioned don't do Cointelegraph. Stuff like that is valuable, definitely, but also really, invest your time in communities. That's where I came from as a community member myself, at the end of 2016. I was just a bit of a DGen in a way. I had a bit more time then. And I was just in a bunch of different communities, and I learned from being in these communities and then asking people or DMing these people, I don't understand what permissionless means, or I don't understand what a DAO model, tell me the different constructs of it. And they provide information because it's very unique in Web3 that people want to help. They really are happy to share information. So do some research, know what you're going into in the sense where it's a bit like working in media or airlines. It's very busy. And I think for a lot of Web2 people, it can be a bit of a shock when you join. Um, but if you do your research, you can kind of get a beat on the pulse. So do some research, understand what you're getting into in terms of a workload, apply some really good Web2 fundamentals in terms of end-to-end tracking and performance monitoring, and just enjoy the ride. It's a very unique time to enter our space, and we really are very early.
Great, very practical, easy to understand advice, Tristan. Really appreciate that. And again, applicable to beyond Web3 as well, right? I mean, it's never a bad idea to do your research, understand what you're getting into, really dive in, get your hands dirty, beyond just reading a few articles before you actually decide something you want to do. When it comes
Well,
to,
if you think about hiring, man, on that note, right? When you hire people or when you apply for a role, if you can be sharp enough to understand what's going on in their ecosystem, you've already shown enough aptitude that you can learn quickly. And that's irrespective of if you're a Web 2 or Web 3. I've spent the time to really research what's going on. I can kind of understand a little bit about some of the pain points you might have. And here's, a potential adaptive way that I might approach this. That's a lot more powerful than just going in blind and listening, because you're not really going to impress someone if you don't have at least, I guess, the effort or the time to do a bit of research pre-interview. And also things happen. It's not always possible, right? Like you have to go through a multitude of interviews to really fine tune your approach, and that's natural for everyone. But if you interview someone, or if you're being interviewed and you can be sharp on information, that already gives you a step up as opposed to other people.
absolutely. And then taking a couple steps back from the actual interview, what's some advice for folks on actually getting that conversation started? You've been in the space, you've done your homework, you understand where your passions lie, where you can add value, and now you're like, I'm ready to get this conversation started, or at least request a time for a chat with somebody of influence on the team I'm looking to work for. What's some advice on actually getting that conversation started?
I think you have to take a kind of multi-pronged approach, to be honest. I think recruiters are incredibly important in general across all industries, but very much in Web3. I think I actually see Nathan, one of the recruiters that I worked with closely, that actually really helped me with Babylon. Recruiters really will get your foot in the door over and above you applying yourself. If you think about Web3, dependent on the different role in the company, there are hundreds of applications. And so, practicality wise, on the back end, there is either an HR person or someone that part-time job is to do HR that doesn't have a huge amount of time, that needs to scan through a list of 100 different people that might miss you, not because of any issues that you have or anything you've done wrong, just because of the nature of how humans work. And now, from an AI perspective, that's probably reduced a little bit in terms of human error. Um, but recruiters are really important because they will get a foot in the door for you. And from a client's point of view, when you're going to hire, You brief the recruiter, you spend some time with them. And then when they give you candidates, they've already cut out, you know, so much of the work that you need to do scanning yourself. And so they put you in a really good stead. They can champion you a little bit before you actually go to the interview. They give you context that is deeper context, not gleaned from socials or you know, from different websites. It's actually context of what they're looking for in the role. They walk you through the process, and so they're really, really beneficial. And also for them, from a hiring perspective, they're very valuable because they normally find very good candidates. The other thing as well is there is no one size fits all. I have had some instances where I've applied directly to roles on a website, you know, quite senior roles with big companies, and then I've been able to get straight into an interview process off the back of that. So it's not that if you don't have recruiters and they don't have roles, you just sit still and wait. It's no, you can also apply across the board, you know, try as many different areas as you can. But before kind of doing a cold apply, try and reach out to someone from the team and try and reach out to them in the sense of try not to be spammy in your message, you know, try and say something where this is, and there are also spam examples of this, but this is kind of what I noticed. This is one of the different elements that I think is quite effective. This is something that I would be able to bring to the table. I'd like to continue this discussion. You know, if there's interest, let me know. You know, I still remember an example where we're hiring someone for DYDX and they did a like a social audit. And then through the online portal, there was like a kind of like a document or just like, I think it was a headline that said social audit. And then that made us open the document. And then we're like, okay, that person's shown a lot of aptitude. They've gone above and beyond. That's definitely worth a conversation. So that was a really pertinent example of standing out from the crowd, you know, can mean that you do a little bit of work or you provide some insight that maybe other people haven't. Um, and so I think those are really the three ways for me. I think recruiter first is kind of my mantra and has been for I'd say 13 odd years now. But sometimes recruiters might not have the right role for you. So you also then need to find the projects that you find really interesting and then bring some tangible benefit to that person because depending on the project size, you can get up to a couple hundred, you know, connection requests a day. So if you bring something tangible that they can immediately read, they don't have to read through this 4 paragraphs to get to. I think that really puts you in good stead. And probably the last thing is to an extent, less is more. I think particularly if you're senior, there's so much information you have to comb through that if you see a long message, regardless of who it's from, you're less likely to read it because your mind is kind of engineered around, I don't have the time. I've got to do this and I've got this and I've got that. And it just is, you know, a bit of a natural sense to go, it's too much right now. And so if you're really short and sharp and punchy and you bring some insight, I think that's the best way to do it.
Again, really solid, broad view of how to get that conversation started. Again, recruiters are a great way to start. Shout out to Nathan listening right now. Shout out to our team over at Web3 Job Ops. But of course, another thing I'll add too real quick is just that if you're not a more mid to senior level candidate who has solid experience and stuff that you can show on your resume or a reputation, sometimes it can be harder. And I say this as a recruiter to kind of get the attention of a recruiter because sometimes they have set standards. But if you are a hard worker, if you're actually genuinely passionate about what you're doing and adding value, you can get the attention of the team directly or somebody on the team, which is a really cool thing that we have the opportunity to do here in Web3. So you should take advantage of that as well. And then, of course, less is more, like Tristan mentioned. And then actually, yeah, this is a great time to jump into our theme of the week. Every week we try to have a theme of the week, dive into one of the aspects of getting hired, being successful in a role in Web3. The theme of this week is keys to a 10 out of 10 candidate. And I would love to ask you, Tristan, you are in the unique position of being in a senior role. You've interviewed people, you know, you look, you know what would add value to a team like yours. What do you look for in a candidate?
There's a few different things I look for in a candidate, to be honest. And I think the challenge that you have is I'll explain what I think for me is relevant. But everyone is really different across the board. I think one of the only areas in Web3 that I've seen that has very similar standards in terms of what they're looking for is Kraken. They have these things called tentaculaments, which are, the kind of 10 guiding principles that they have. And for them, it's very much around, uh, the mission is an absolute goal, and this is something that you have to believe in, to democratize financial access and equitable, access to financial opportunities for everyone, and a bunch of different things underneath it. But one of the things that stood out for me, coincidentally, when I read that recently, was they also look for people that are different. And I think that for me, from a 10 out of 10 candidate, I'm not looking for a candidate that fits a certain criteria. You worked for, you went to university at Stanford or Harvard, and, you worked at a really large consulting firm, and then you worked at, a very large bank. And for me, it's less about where you've worked and more about whether I can sense that you're going to work hard and pitch in and do what it takes to get the job done, and really row in the same direction as everyone. And from a cultural point of view, then that becomes very important. So I think then to kind of bring that out in terms of how could you be a 10 out of 10 candidate, I think part of that is also what I've mentioned a little bit in terms of showing an aptitude to work hard. I think working hard it's really important, but you also don't have to be stupid. You don't have to do 80 hours a week for the sake of it. Work hard when you need to work hard, and take time off when you need to take time off so you can recharge. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all need to have our own down periods. Otherwise, we just go a little bit crazy. So I think from a candidate point of view, if you can show some of that aptitude pre-interview to say, I've done a little bit of work, I understand things. When you get into the interview as well, if you can kind of provide examples where you can talk through previous experience, which is not necessarily you've been asked to do something. You've really taken the initiative because you've seen that from a results point of view, this was necessary. And no one said, I want you to go do this exact thing. You don't need to be instructed on everything. You took initiative yourself, you drove results, you reported on it. You were able to be quite clear about why you did things. Of course, don't do anything dangerous. Don't steal funds or dox people or whatever it may be. But that's also definitely something that I look for. And then I think other elements as well is to get to that point of an interview. You need to have that process of recruiters or reaching out to individuals, but also then from a resume point of view, keep it simple. 3 pages is almost enough, to say, okay, that's a lot of information. I don't know how to glean what's good or what's valuable or what is the most important part. So really less on that context is more. So simple revenue, simple process, do some work. And then really from a cultural point of view, uh, connecting with the individual that you're talking to can be really difficult sometimes. So it might not always work, and that might make you nervous. And you might think, well, I've done, so many interviews and getting through this process was really difficult and I'm not connecting with people. You will connect with someone when the time is right. You will end up finding the right job with the right person. Because that's also something from a candidate point of view. You have to feel that you've got some kind of a connection with them, because logically you spend more time with work colleagues, than you do your family. So the more that you can show that you can take your own initiatives, you're very focused from a results or performance point of view, whatever way, shape, or form that needs for you in different roles, right? And then also, if you don't have a cultural fit with someone, it's okay. It's hard. Getting rejected from roles is really hard. I've been rejected from so many, as we all have, to be honest. But the right role will come with the right people. And maintaining that belief is probably one of the biggest advices for a 10 out of 10 candidate. If you're going into something and you're quite low on energy and things have made you very tired and you're feeling not confident in yourself, you're not going to be the best version of yourself. And it can be really hard to be energetic when it just feels sometimes, I guess, after rejection after rejection. But keep the energy up, be organized and structured. And then that should put you in a much better stead versus other candidates. And then just keep it simple as well. too much waffle can be hard for people to decipher whether it was valuable or not.
That's really good advice, and it's really encouraging, I think, because that's stuff that you can take control of yourself today, right? You can make sure that you're prepared going into it. You can make sure that less is more. You can make sure that you have a confident, energetic attitude. And those are things that we all have control of on the day to day. Now, everything else, the skill set, the experience, that stuff that comes over time, but we have control of that stuff. And then I want to ask you real quick as a follow up to that, in your experience, Tristan, how accurate has your sense of individuals been? Have you found that you've had a good read on folks when you get that positive sense more often than not?
It's been almost 100% that sense. But senses change over time as well. I can get a fairly quickly, I can get a sense of people, but you also have to really understand and deeply understand what drives people, what motivates them, how to make them successful. And I think leading is more often than not about providing the runway for your team to grow and succeed. If you micromanage, if you kind of force people down a pigeonhole of doing something that they're not passionate about, you can't really question why the work isn't good enough because you haven't given team members, what they need or the tools that they need to A, be happy, and happiness is the most important part of success, and then B, deliver results. So on the sense where I can get a sense quite quickly of people, I also don't make a decision quickly because there are different layers to every single person. We're all very complex. And only after a certain period of time do you really get to understand, is that sense that I initially got accurate? Or is that just, you know, part of my brain making a decision when decisions made quickly are really good ones? Maybe if you're drinking and you're tired and you want to get a cab home because it's 3 a.m., that's a good decision, right? But in general, you know, a bit of patience, I think, is really good. So I think it's good to trust your instinct on things, but I also think it's kind of smart to be patient because nothing good in life comes fast. And that's the same with people. Nothing good is ever going to come from someone unless you have enough time or you provide enough time or the right tool sets for people to be successful. I think one thing as well that I didn't mention just before, man, in terms of bringing energy, I think that is really important to bring energy to an interview, but energy in your way. I think what's the most important is to be genuinely yourself. And so if you're someone who's quiet, you're someone who is, a bit more introverted, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing. Introversion, extroversion, it doesn't mean anything. It's just you're slightly different in some way. But if you bring your genuine self to the interview, therefore you have more energy in yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be crazy energetic with someone. It just bring your genuine self to the interview. And that can be really fucking hard. It can be really tiring. You could be exhausted. You could have slept badly. You could have had too many coffees or not enough. And there's many reasons, so 5 minutes before the interview, be calm, be yourself, be prepared, be structured. Um, and then I think that's also kind of flows through into what we're talking now in terms of the sense of someone. You can quite quickly get a sense of if someone is prepped, not prepped, their calmness, their ability to handle stress based on how you engage with them. Um, so I think that's quite important where trust your instinct, but your instinct is not a decision made in within 10 minutes is not very rarely clever. So trust instincts, but also try and activate the logical part of your brain.
Well said. It's like a balance, right? It's like listening to your first impressions while also allowing room for evolution of those same perspectives and confirmation over time. You mentioned success is happiness. We're almost at time here. We're gonna just ask a couple more questions, but could you expand a little bit more on that, on like what success means to you?
I mean, it means a few different things practicality wise. So I think one of the areas for success from a marketing perspective is the ability to drive results and to be able to show what those results are. I think Web3 is difficult sometimes to show results because of what I mentioned at the start, in the sense where you don't often own the end-to-end, conversion point, but there's always ways to show results. So making sure that you have logic behind decision making that's viewable and transparent is incredibly important, because data speaks a lot louder, than any personal opinion can. And it can either save your job, it can get you a job, or it can show you as a really top performer by what you can prove. Because underneath each business, you need to prove that you're driving value across every single role that you have. Otherwise, you won't have a role for very long. So I think from a success point of view, I think that is very important in every role, to be able to show from a data and analytics point of view how you've brought success. And that can come in many different ways. To set that out as an example, if you think about events, you can say, it's hard to tell success. They're big branding exercises, and people who went on stage and they performed well, and logistics wise, everything was on time. But if you think about it in another way, what's the purpose of going to an event? And more often than not, it's actually for personal and interpersonal work connections with people. So therefore, business development is very important. So if you're in a BD team and you want to refresh your lead pipeline, events are critical for that. You get to cut through all the kind of nonsense of a cold email or an in-mail, or a cold telegram, and you can talk direct face to face with someone. And so from that point of view, then you turn around and you go, they're lead generating exercises. Okay, that's interesting. But should you just go only for leads? And then you go, well, actually they do really well from a brand awareness and marketing point of view. So, okay, what's the target that I want to add towards this event coming up? Do I want 100,000 impressions, 300, whatever the number is? And then the final part, and actually the most important part of an event, is really your team bonding, and, bonding with different people that either is in your team or you meet as new friends, and then you grow your own personal network. So that stepped out example is how you turn something kind of ethereal into something which is quite trackable and then can be repeated. And I think that is, how you can see success come out. I think if I'm speaking specifically about myself and, a leadership role, it's going to sound a little bit weird when I say this, but what I think is very successful is in, a year or year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, after working with a team, you actually don't need to be there anymore, and they function just the same without you. You're not the single point of failure. You're not the person that has to do everything and be everywhere. You've actually empowered your team. You've created structures. You've given them freedom. You've allowed them to grow as individuals, so they feel that they have the ownership over their specific area, so that you don't actually have to do so much heavy lifting. Your team is already an optimized machine that knows what they're doing. And that also then typically means they're a happy team. You know, it's quite rare that if you're empowered and you're driving results because you've been taught how, or maybe you know how to do it yourself, or you're allowed to do different things and try things yourself without seeking approval for everything. It's quite rare that people are unhappy. Where the unhappiness really stems from is, overt micromanagement, a lack of direction, miscommunication, or not protecting your team. So I think from a success point of view, look towards driving results and how you can prove your own value. That's always important, no matter what stage of the business you're in. Whether you're successful or not successful, you can prove your own value. That's important. And then from a leadership point of view, it's really about creating structures and empowering team members so that you don't have to be there and they keep functioning really well. And also having the braveness to not have to be the one that's like, I'm here, it only works because of me. It's like, take a step out of that. It's not about you. Team leadership is as much, similar in a way to kind of being a parent, where you really need to abstract yourself away from you're the most important thing in the world, and you really need to be patient, and you need to be kind, and you need to be understanding and thoughtful, and you need to give your child, in this instance, the necessary tools to grow. And that's the same with the team. Empower them, make them happy, get them to work on what they want to work on, also encourage the team, from my perspective, to move out of their comfort zone a little bit and try some different things to expand their skill set. So the next role that they go to doesn't just have to be marketing. Maybe they go, hey, I want to help the BD guys. Go for it. Go do it. Still do your job, but if you want to do additional things, do it, because you're not going to stay at this job forever. So the more skills you have, the higher chance you have to go through what we discussed at the start, which is, a pipeline to attract different recruiters that might work in BD in that example. So I think for me to kind of close that out, and I'm rambling a little bit. I think that's really success. I think success for a team is empowering the team, and for an individual, it's proving that you have value through results.
Well said, Tristan. I really appreciate the way you view things, man. I mean, it really shines through. It seems like you are someone who brings your humanness through with you wherever you go, and I think that makes you a better leader and better in all of your roles. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah, I think that definitely helps. But it's also something that has been learnt over time. I've been working 16, 17 years, and there were many times where I wasn't very good at my job, or I wasn't a good team leader, or I needed training. And one ability I've always had, and I don't really know where it comes from, is if I get feedback, to take it on board, to not fight it, to not be combative against it. When I worked at a bank, as an example, there was an incident where I didn't handle the situation very well. And the person said, hey, this has upset me. I think the way you spoke to me in this meeting wasn't very good. I'm not very happy with this. And I was like, you're right. You know, you're completely right. I apologize for that. And then I suggested, to my leader at the time that I needed leadership training, because I could kind of sense in myself like, hey, that's not a very mature way to handle things. So I think that was also something that helps from the human angle point of view, is the fact that I've had training a lot across a lot of roles, and I've learned from very smart people, and very good people that don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room, but they're incredibly good at engaging with people. And so I think that makes it a little bit more human, is to have gone through experiences where I haven't done very well, but be humble enough to turn around and say, you know what, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm going to learn. Let me put my humble cap on. Let me take a step back, and then through the patterns that you're taught from these trainings, they start to become instinctual. And then I think you start to really shine.
That makes sense, and it all starts with being open, like you said, being open to growth. We're just about at time, but I want to ask you, Tristan, you've given so much insight in these last 40 minutes. What final advice, kind of encapsulating advice, would you have for folks listening on how to either break into working in Web3 or to advance their careers in Web3?
It's probably not the most exciting advice, to be honest, but I think it's the most important. Be persistent. I think persistence is one of the most important traits that you can have. I cannot tell you how many times I've been rejected from roles. It would be, 10x, 15x more. And if I had given up, I wouldn't be sitting here, in my office right now talking to you about, having joined Babylon as CMO. I would have just given up, and I would have, moved to something else, and then I wouldn't be as happy as I am now. And I think persistence is really hard to hear, because you're like, yeah, you don't know what it's like to be, not be able to crack Web3, not be able to break into it because you've tried so many times. And I think people can get quite down on themselves. They're like, what's wrong with me as a person? 9 times out of 10, it's got nothing to do with you. It's just circumstantial. They're looking for a very specific trait in a very specific person, and you might not fit that. Or you maybe had a bad day, or maybe they decided as a business, they're changing direction and they don't necessarily want to hire for certain roles. So be persistent, and then you will work in Web3. Work your butt off when you make it into the industry, but also manage that work your butt off workload. Work hard and know when to work hard. And then when there's, less to do, take it easy. Manage your own personal energy, because if you don't, you burn out. And that, for someone and a company, is far worse. But really, to round out everything, it would just be persistent. And I know that's hard to hear, because someone told me that many years ago, and it's like, well, you haven't had, 50 interviews and been rejected from every single one. You don't know what it feels like. And that person's like, yeah, I had 100. So I know exactly what that feels like. And this person that I'm talking about ended up being a CEO of a major bank. So, it was really, that was the thing for me. I was like, shit, well, if that person has been through that, then I guess he's right. And I would say that everyone has gone through that. Every single successful person has more failure than success. And that extends to sport, that extends to everything in life. But just if you want to break into Web3, or if you're in Web3 looking for another role, just be persistent. It'll happen. Stay strong in your mind, as hard as that can be. And eventually, good things will come, and those good things will come because you've worked your ass off for it.
That's so true, man. I remember when I heard the fact that Kobe, he's literally like Kobe, the basketball player. He was literally, or he is literally one of the number one or number two. He has like the most missed shots in the NBA or something like that. Like he's up there. And so, like you said, it's just an example of like any successful individual has failed more than they succeed,
Michael
right?
Jordan, Cristiano
Like,
Ronaldo,
exactly.
Lionel Messi, every single one of them, it's the exact same pattern. They all have the same rejection for success. And the rejection is what molds you. And from a fighter's point of view, normally it's losing a fight where you learn the most. So yeah, it's extendable to every part of life. But I think that's the hardest, best lesson to take away from, cracking into Web3 or getting involved with Seek Assistant.
Boom. No better place to put a pin in it than there, man. I couldn't think of a better way to end the conversation. Tristan, it's been a pleasure. I've learned a ton in these last 45 minutes. I hope listeners have as well. Shout out Ollie, shout out Eric, shout out Kasali, anyone listening recording, whether that's here on X, Spotify, or YouTube. Tristan, last question for folks listening. How can we support you? How can we support your team over at Babylon?
I think probably the first thing would be to follow us on socials, to be honest. So you can kind of see the pin tweet here at Babylon Labs _IO on X. But really, it would be follow us, go to our socials, and connect and engage and talk with us as a team. You'd be surprised some of the things that we take on board and then adapt, from an ecosystem point of view. So follow us, learn a bit about us, understand if it's right for you, and then engage with us. Eric is on this call in my team now, and he's, a fantastic team member, but also works very closely with the community. So reach out to us if you've got questions, if you've got thoughts, if you've got ways that you think could be, things could be done better. We're really all ears. Babylon is a fantastic company. It's the biggest project in the Bitcoin ecosystem in a few different metrics, but we're never too big to listen, and we're never too big to change. So join us, follow us. But thank you very much for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, Tristan, can't thank you enough. Thank you once again to everybody listening. This has been Cup of Joe, episode 28, with none other than Tristan Dickinson. We wish you a great rest of your week. If you're in the States, happy Thanksgiving to you. And yeah, final call. Tristan, thanks a ton, man. Hope you have a great rest of your day
Thank
and
you.
week.
Happy Thanksgiving all.
All right, brother. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Rooting for you. Appreciate you. And we will see you soon.